In what can only be described as a capitulation, Donald Trump called time out in his trade war with China this week. By doing so, he not only handed Xi Jinping an easy victory in round 2, but he's also weakened his negotiating position in the next round. What prompted Trump to cave without putting up a fight in round 2? Was it a strategic reassessment? Was it just a tactical retreat? What might the Russia-Ukraine war have to do with his decision? And what does it mean for your money? The White House is calling the China-U.S. trade deal an historic trade deal for the United States. But how can it be a historic win for the U.S. if China got everything it demanded? These are the facts. The U.S. lowered its reciprocal tariff on Chinese imports to just 10% during a 90-day pause, the same level as for the 55 other countries currently in reciprocal tariff negotiations with the U.S. But what sets China apart from the other 56 countries is that Trump agreed to allow China to keep a 10% retaliatory tariff on U.S. imports during the pause. Not only the U.S. gained no advantage whatsoever against China, China got a better deal than everyone else. Everyone else, including the UK, that Trump calls one of America's greatest allies. In the U.S.-UK deal Trump announced last week, the U.S. maintains the 10% blanket tariff on British imports, while the UK agreed not to introduce retaliatory tariffs on imports from the U.S. Trump called the U.S.-UK deal a good deal for the UK and predicted that other trading partners may end up with much higher final tariffs because of their large trade surpluses with the U.S. I cannot imagine Keir Starmer was too pleased when he saw the details of the U.S.-China deal. Nor am I surprised that Beijing is celebrating what it sees as a vindication of its negotiating strategy, notwithstanding the fact that the 20% fentanyl-related tariff on Chinese imports still remains. I said 3 weeks ago that the U.S. won the first round of the trade war when it succeeded in cornering and isolating China. I think China won round 2. It is too early to say which side will win the third round, but the fact that Trump caved in the second round without putting up much of a fight will cost him. It will only reinforce China's perception that Trump is a paper tiger. Surely Trump, who prides himself as a deal maker, understands that credibility is everything in any negotiation. So why did he decide to back down so quickly in the showdown with China? The answer to this question is important if we want to make a prediction of what he will do in round 3. To make predictions about the decisions people make, we need to understand their reaction functions. Since we can't get inside Trump's head, we can only infer his reaction function by following closely what he does and by connecting the dots. Was it a coincidence that Trump's capitulation to China came on the same day that the European Union's ultimatum to Putin went into effect? After all, only 3 days earlier, Trump himself had threatened more sanctions if Russia did not agree to an immediate, unconditional ceasefire. Since the start of his presidency until last week, Trump was pursuing a policy of appeasement with Russia, but a policy of confrontation with China, supposedly in an attempt to drive a wedge between China and Russia. So is it so surprising that Trump pivoted on China at the same time that he was forced to pivot on Russia? Forced because Trump's effort to end the war in Ukraine had run out of road after Putin's rejection of his peace proposal last month. As I argued in a video 3 weeks ago, Trump's biggest foreign policy blunder so far is having seriously underestimated the challenge of ending the Ukraine war and completely misreading Putin's red lines. Mistakes of this scale have consequences. The result of this failure is that Russia hawks in Washington and in Europe are now back in the driver's seat, agitating to use the stick to force Putin to bend. Starmer Emmanuel Macron wants to send troops into Ukraine. Lindsey Graham wants to introduce new sanctions to cripple Russia's economy. The tension between NATO and Russia is set to escalate. Is it possible that with the war drums beating ever more loudly, Trump decided to delay his trade war showdown with China? Sometimes to win a war, you need to lose a battle. Therefore, I think Trump's capitulation to China is a tactical retreat, a temporary de-escalation so that he does not have to fight China and Russia at the same time. If I'm right, the U.S.-China trade war is far from over. Trump reportedly has talked about washing his hands of the Russia-Ukraine war. But walking away from the war is easier said than done. Richard Nixon campaigned in 1968 on ending the Vietnam War, promising peace with honor. The promise was a key part of his appeal to voters' disillusion with the war and a major reason for his victory. But not only Nixon did not manage to end the war during his presidency, the war escalated with increased U.S. involvement under his watch. Indeed, a third of Americans killed in combat during the war happened under Nixon's presidency. Nixon did not want to be known as the president who lost South Vietnam to communism. Does Trump want to be known as the president who lost Ukraine? I'm not suggesting that Trump will ever send U.S. troops into Ukraine. But is he prepared to stand aside while Russian troops drive deeper and deeper into Ukraine and Europe gets dragged into the war? Lindsey Graham said that he has already gotten the support of 72 senators behind him in a bone-crushing sanctions on Russia. If such a bill were to arrive on Trump's desk, can he justify vetoing it given his approach to ending the war has failed so spectacularly? The Russian offensive in Ukraine has slowed since Trump was sworn in. I suspect that the offensive will pick up pace in the weeks ahead as Russia seeks to take control of the rest of the Donbass that it is not yet under Russian control. With the sharp decline in oil price since the start of the war, Putin might decide that time is not on his side. All this leads me to see a serious escalation of geopolitical risk in Europe in the weeks ahead. The global stock market staged another big rally on the news of Trump's capitulation in his trade war with China. S&P 500 has rallied more than 20% since April 9th and is just 4% below its all-time high. Meanwhile, the dollar has rallied while gold sold off. Yet, if my analysis is correct, all that has happened is that trade war risk has been replaced by geopolitical risk. I don't know what's worse for the global economy, but I think an escalation of the Ukraine war would be especially negative for European assets, including the euro. And it should be bullish for gold. Talking about geopolitical risks, there's also the U.S. Iran nuclear negotiation to consider. Trump is sending out a lot of mixed signals on Iran. Last week, he said that he would only accept a total dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program. He said that Iran's centrifuges will either blow up nicely in a deal or viciously without one. This week, he says he's close to a deal with Iran and that Iran has already sort of agreed to his terms. I don't know what's the truth. However, with 200 congressmen signing a joint letter this week urging Trump to follow up on his plan to dismantle Iran's nuclear capabilities, Trump may not have too much room to cave to Iran, like he did with China, even if he should want to. In any case, Iran will never agree to give up its enrichment capabilities. This could mean that Trump's attempt to do a deal with Iran will soon be at a dead end too. If this turns out to be the case, it will be just another reason to buy gold. Thank you for listening.